Hi friends, Laurelei Black from Blade Broom, and this week we're going to talk about the broom closet and being in it, or not being in it. When we talk about the broom closet as a witch or a craft practitioner, what we're talking about is how open or how secret you are with your craft practice to either your family or your friends or just sort of the world around you. I feel very strongly that this is an individual choice that every practitioner of the craft has to make for themselves, and that we should not allow ourselves to be pressured or bullied by anybody else, or that we shouldn't feel like we have to hold ourselves to the same sort of measuring stick that somebody else is using for themselves in their own lives, because our circumstances can be really different than somebody else's. I have been a craft practitioner for about 25 years at this point. So I started when I was 20, and I am now just about 45 years old. In that 25 years, I have gone from being loud and proud and in everybody's face about what I was doing to being very sort of secretive and circumspect about my practice, because that was in my best interest at the time. And I've been everywhere in between. And it's funny to me that even now in 2020, people are still having this debate. I see it still in magical communities. I see it in occult communities. Just recently, an author and presenter who has always presented their work under their legal name was just trying to sort of reevaluate for themselves whether or not that was something they were going to continue to do within sort of the ceremonial magic side of things, which I'm fairly involved in, being one of the directors of the Babylon Rising Festival. I interact with a lot of presenters and writers, speakers within that realm, and it's not uncommon to go either direction, either to absolutely adopt a clearly magical name, Frater Percival, for instance, and I'm just pulling one out of the air, although I know a Frater Percival, but there's probably, a dozen Frater Percivals out there. But to pull Frater Percival or Sorer Agape, again, I know one, but there's probably a dozen or more, because agape is a name that means something within that community. And so to adopt that as sort of your magical motto, and to really incorporate it into what you're doing and to sort of brand your work with it, is not an uncommon practice. And to use that then as a shield to protect your mundane life with can make a certain sense for a lot of people. And then again, on the other hand, you see quite a few people within the ceremonial magic community, and I'm using them as an example because I see really sort of this stark dichotomy there. You see a lot of people who really embrace using their legal name, and that works too. What I find is that those folks tend to have a certain security and safety within their career or their profession, in the sense that their livelihood is built around esoterica and magical concepts already. So a lot of times their scholarship, and a lot of them are involved in academia and the scholarly arts. They're working in a university system, for instance. And so their studies are already built on things like anthropology and philosophy and history, and they're given a certain latitude by their peers in their academic departments to explore these things without judgment, because that's what they study for their career. Very often, people who are using their magical motto or their magical name as a shield in the publishing world are protecting careers that might crumble because those career fields are not going to be nearly as accepting of a magical lifestyle, whether that's ceremonial magic, witchcraft, heathenry, you name it. They're going to take a look at that and go, oh, there's no room for that here. And trust me, I understand because I've been there, but I have a right. I have a right to practice this religion. I have a right to practice this this philosophy, this way of life, this however it is that you define your craft, that you define your practice. You do. You absolutely 100% have that right. Unfortunately, there are a whole lot of states that have embedded within their laws the right to hire and fire at will, and they don't have to have a reason to fire you. They don't have to have a reason to let you go. They don't have to have a reason to keep you on the outside of their little club and to pass you over for promotion. And I'm speaking from hard experience in this, in that I've lost a teaching career essentially because I was loud and proud as a young public school teacher. I published under my legal name and a student doxed me. I made it really easy. You know, I was on the internet under my legal name publishing with pentacles and, you know, I was in several publications at that point. I know similar stories from lots of people who have been in that position. That's why I can stand here and say that choice has to be very individualized. I don't want to scare anybody into saying you really need to be secret and private about your practice, because again, I think that choice has to be yours. But when somebody shares that they choose to be more private about their practice because they want to protect their custodial rights as a parent, or they need to be concerned about their standing at their job, or they have housing concerns, or they're worried about how their family is going to react, and they have safety, you know, perhaps they actually have safety concerns about that. I think it's important within our community to find a level of acceptance within that and to understand that secrecy and privacy is actually an old part of the craft. It's a modern right that we've been able to put ourselves out there publicly as practitioners. The anti-witchcraft laws were only repealed in the 1950s. That's not even 100 years ago. So it's been fairly recent and people are still getting used to the idea. We've got a long way to go. I think it's also really important to remember that witch is not a term that practitioners prior to the 1950s really used for themselves. And really even in the 1950s, when the documents were first starting to get put out there, by Gardner, by Cochrane, by other writers that were contemporaries of these two, they weren't calling themselves witches. Gardner was calling himself a Wiccan, which was a new term. It was. Look at your history. I know that even just saying that is controversial, but he was pulling from some still hotly debated scholarship along the word Wicca. So Wicca may or may not be as ancient a term as we like to think it is, and this is not the episode for us to get into that necessarily, but look into the actual history of that word. It may not be as ancient as we like to think it is today. And that's okay, because it still has come to mean something, you know, and it represents something for the religion that it represents, and that's okay. But Gardner wasn't necessarily flying the flag of witch. He was flying the flag of Wicca. Cochrane also was not flying the flag of witch. He didn't go around calling himself a witch. He called himself a Pellar, actually. And for the Gardnerians and Alexandrians, Pellar means an oath breaker, actually. It means a traitor. So, and in another episode, I'm going to talk about this idea of sort of the outcasts and the heretics, and why that's important in witchcraft, why the idea of choice is important in witchcraft. Because it is. But it was really further along the line that we started embracing the term witch. Other terms were more common. The wise was certainly in play. During Cochrane's time, during Gardner's time, prior to them, and then even after them, you'll see traditional practitioners referring to themselves as one of the wise, or as being of the wise. Cunning is another, and you see versions of cunning being used in the Americas, being used in the British Isles, being used in different places in Europe, something like cunning or kenning. But this idea of knowing things, of knowing hidden things, which is what occult means, by the way, if you're a little afraid of the term occult. I know some people that are watching this are definitely not afraid of the term occult. If that term has scared you, all occult means is hidden. It means that which isn't seen. And as practitioners of these arts, that's what we do. We work with those things that are hidden, and we often hide them. We work in the shadows. We work in the dark. We work behind the scenes. We don't always put our work right out there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you look to some of the old Hermetic wisdom, the 4 powers of the Sphinx are to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. There's power in that silence. There's power in not speaking everything you know. There's power in hiding sometimes. I've mentioned before in other videos too that family names are also part of what some practitioners use as part of their identification and as part of their identity within the craft. So terms like the family to refer to the craft in general, or family type names to refer to covens or organizations of covens. So the people, the family, or the people of. So I'll again reference Cochrane's coven, which was the people of Goda, the clan of Tubal-Cain. So a clan is like a larger family structure, meaning that it's several that are coming together. In a lot of ways, witch is actually like a term we got branded with. You know, it was a bad thing until very recently to be called a witch. And honestly, most people still consider it a bad thing. Most people in the world still consider it a bad thing to be called a witch. And most people around the world, if you get called a witch, there are dire consequences for that, even right now. There are people right now in the world who are being killed over that term. And when I say, and I have said, that it's a privilege to be able to use that. In the United States, it's a right. You get to call yourself that term, or really pretty much whatever else you want. We have that as a right. But it doesn't mean that other people are necessarily going to respond well to it, because we have centuries of historical aggression against witches, fear of witches that's been bred. And it's a derogatory term. It's inherently a derogatory term. When I say witch, I often do so without thinking at this point. I've been using it for 25 years, and after the first year, I lost my fear of that word. Absolutely have lost my fear of the word. I don't think anything when I say witch or pagan. I don't. And I forget that it incites fear in others. But it's important, I think, for us to sometimes remember that it does. It does actually make people scared. That's an important part of our considerations, I think, as we're debating for ourselves this issue of, are we in the broom closet or are we loud and proud? I think another part of the consideration is that it's important for you to have a good sense of identity, and that's knowing your whole self. And that whole self is not ever going to be fully understood by any other single person, in my opinion. And I'm going to refer back to myself a bit. For instance, I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a teacher. I'm a public speaker. I'm an author. I'm a daughter and a stepdaughter. I'm a board member for Midian festivals and events. I'm a festival organizer. I'm a coven member. There are a lot of things that I am. A lot, way more than I'm going to be able to name right here, right? But you can kind of see where I'm going with this. And the thing is, I've mostly named things right here where you can see that I have a relationship with one or more other people. In each of those situations, people know me and interact with me in a certain way. If you were to think about your own roles and your own identity, you can think about the different parts and how people interact with you, and that none of those people has the opportunity to fully interact with you in all of those spaces where you move. For me, being a witch is a deeply integrated part of myself. I've been a witch for over half my life, and there's never a day that I don't do something, often many things, related to my craft. So for me, I don't leave being a witch at the door of my house or at door of the covenstead, you know, at the gate of the compass when ritual is over. When I worked for somebody else, I didn't leave it at the office door and stop being a witch when I walked in. But I also didn't feel like I needed to bring it up when I was there at staff meetings. I didn't feel like I needed to preface my statements with, well, I'm a witch and I think that. Or from the witchcraft perspective, we would say, if you find that you want to be somewhere between loud and proud all the time, wearing pentacles and a badge that says, I'm a witch, ask me how. And the other end of the spectrum, where you are entirely like the undercover, like, pagan soccer mom that nobody knows is the pagan part, and the president of the PTSA. You can integrate the symbols of the craft that are not quite so in your face. So things like the Triskel, which I've said elsewhere on the channel is actually a more deeply potent symbol for me and for my tradition than the pentacle or pentagram. Or you can do things like wear charms that are connected to individual spirits that are with you. That type of thing. Things that may still get some notice because people will be drawn to the power of what they represent for you. They can feel it humming. And so you'll get comments all the time of, ooh, I love that. That's beautiful. What does it mean? And you'll just go, oh, it's just a collection of special things. And often people will say, oh, I totally get that. I have blah, 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 blah. And they'll tell you all about their special things. So just to reiterate, I think it's really important for every individual to make the choice for themselves and to understand that this may be a continuum that you fluctuate on. You may have times where you are being your truest self by wearing the "I'm a witch, ask me how" name tag. And you may have times where you're being your truest self by protecting some aspect of your life, by shielding the part of you that practices the craft or that practices sorcery or magic, and keeping that from the eyes of the profane. It's not necessarily for everybody all the time. And the important thing to remember, something that I know that I struggled with and I have seen others struggle with, and so I'm saying it to you in case you're struggling with it, is you are still being your true self. You're still being authentic, even if you're not bringing every piece of you to every encounter you have. You don't owe it to everybody to show them every side of you all the time. You owe it to yourself to protect yourself. And only you can say when you need that protection. I hope this video has been helpful for you. I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments, your experiences in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. And I will see you here next Monday at noon. Bye, guys.